The problem with the Intel CPU, so for those that don't know what this is an Intel 14/13 900K CPU die, basically with all the labels on all the components. This is a Raptor Cove. That means that it's Raptor Lake core. This is a P core. It's a single P core. So this is another one, another one, another one. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are the 8 P cores. So these are the 8 P cores up here and down here. That is not where the problem is. You can boost these all the way to 6 gigahertz and you will never, these cores do not have the problem. It means if you're afraid that you're boosting your cores, I'm sorry, but that is not related to the problem. The problem is not the Raptor Cove cores. So meaning I can overclock this to, I can make these two go to 6 gigahertz and I'll never run into the problem. The problem has nothing to do with the Raptor Cove. Just FYI, okay? So that's number one. So I can overclock these and I don't have to worry about anything breaking down or whatever, because that's not the source of the problem. See, that's not where the problem lies. Now, ultimately, what they're going to have to do to fix the problem, though, because it is a hardware problem, there is a serious hardware problem with the design. And part of the reason, I would say, is probably to heat density and electron migration happening in the VCC-SA area, which means the failure is actually happening in the area pertaining to the compute fabric. This is where the root of the problem lies, which means it could be anywhere in the middle of the Raptor Lake CPU. This is the reason why when people disable, I forgot to label these. So this is a Grace mod, also known as an E-core. So if you notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These 8 are for an i5, like a 13600K. Now, if we add 4 more, we have 12. This is an i7 14700K. 13700K only has these. It doesn't have this and this, okay? Now, the i9 is unique in that it adds an additional 4 on the end here. So now you have a total of 16. You have 8 down here and you have 8 up here. So you have 16 E-cores. The reason why the i9s are the ones that are most likely to see this problem is because the compute fabric is stretched to its limit in terms of the amount of current flow to keep all these cores, both P and E, filled all the time. There were significant changes in this section of the CPU from 12 to 13th gen, meaning from Alder Lake to Raptor Lake. Specifically, the clock speed of every single one of these E-cores clocks significantly higher on the 13th and 14th gen compared to the 12th gen. So for one thing, the voltage levels and current levels through a 12th gen i9 12900K is going to be lower, significantly lower than any of the 13th and 14th gen, which are basically the same thing, except for the i7. There is a difference in the Grace mod core count there. In terms of the current flow, in terms of the voltage, because the more components you have, the more electricity you have to drive, because you have to keep a lot of these parts moving and powered and fed and all this sort of thing. So I suspect that the problem with the hardware, the actual root cause of the problem, is somewhere here in the middle. It's one of these parts that fails over time. Meaning you can overclock your P-core and literally no one cares, because that's not where the root cause of the problem is. Now, the thing that I'll say, what I suspect will exacerbate or accelerate this failure is higher VCCSA. VCCSA voltages directly impact the memory controller, but it also affects the compute fabric. And that's the reason why when you read up on the actual problems that people are having with the CPU, oftentimes some of the workarounds involve what I have shown in my video, which is basically run it at a lower power limit, because if you run it at a lower power limit, it means your current draw is going to be less. It means your voltages on average are going to be a little bit lower. Not necessarily the voltage will change that much, but the current will change because, you know, power equals voltage times current. What I am saying here is the root cause of the problem is definitely the compute fabric. It is not the actual cores. So keep that in mind. And the reason why some people have claimed that they can fix, or not really fix, but avoid the problem is by turning off their E-cores. They shut down all their E-cores in the BIOS. They basically go into the BIOS, they disable all of the Gracemont E-cores so that they only have their 8 P-cores. They effectively turn their i9 into an 11th gen i9. But that's basically what they do. So by turning all of these off, you shut down all of this. None of this needs to function. So now you've reduced the area where the failure could be. Meaning, if, let's say this part of the silicon is faulty, like let's say this is the fault zone. So I'm going to highlight this in red. Somewhere in there, there's a piece of silicon that is damaged, that is defective. It's broken. It doesn't work. So if you turn off the E-cores, you turn all them off, it means this entire chunk of the CPU no longer functions. It's literally shut down. So now all you have is the P-core section. And if the problem no longer happens, then, well, there you go. It's not happening because you shut off the bad part of the CPU. Now, this doesn't always fix the problem, but for some individuals, they have found that if they turn off their E-cores, they no longer have these instability problems. So that, to me, indicates that they have a faulty section of the L3. It could be the L3 cache in the E-core, but I don't really think it's the cache. I'm more inclined to believe that something in the compute fabric is defective, has failed. And the other thing to keep in mind is this is the middlemost section of the CPU. So this is where the hottest point, the hottest temperatures could occur here, if not on the Raptor coves themselves, because those are the ones that are running at the higher frequency. However, the Raptor cove is further away from the middle. So it is, from a thermal density, the compute fabric being in the middle tends to always run at elevated temperatures compared to the rest of the CPU. So on average, your long-term average temperature on the compute fabric is going to be higher. So there may be some problems with electron migration happening prematurely on the compute fabric. So that's my theory. I can't prove this because obviously I don't have the equipment to look at these CPUs under a microscope and examine where, assuming I even have my hands on a CPU that experiences this problem, I don't have the equipment to look at the CPU at a molecular level under a microscope and determine, oh yeah, this cache is fried, or, you know, this part of the compute fabric is damaged, or whatever. If the defective section is, say, over here, like let's say this part is defective, turning off the E-cores isn't going to fix the problem because the problem is actually here. So the way I would troubleshoot this, like if I had a CPU that had this problem and I wanted to figure out what area was actually defective, I would have to start downclocking certain P-cores until I eliminate the problem. So for example, if this cache section and this cache section are affected by the ring bus, if I downclock core 0, and if this is 1, 2, 3, and this is 4, core 0 and core 4, if I downclock those and all of a sudden it's stable, then that means that I've found where the problem potentially could be. So that's my hypothesis on the source of the problem. I think ultimately the fix will be Intel will have to issue a stepping revision with a newer, more robust compute fabric that doesn't have this problem. Or what they'll do is, well, see, they've already released these various BIOS updates to essentially limit the current draw through these CPUs. I don't know if that's going to actually fix the problem. Because if the problem is actually a hardware problem, it's only a matter of time before it can manifest. Now, I don't think every single CPU is prone to this problem. I think some batches are okay. I think others are not okay. And I think a lot of them will see the problem at some point in their lifespan just because they were unlucky and they have the issue. I don't even know if it's a specific stepping within the lifespan of the CPU that has the problem. If that's the case, I think what Intel will probably do is they'll issue a fix on failure. They're not going to do a field notice. They're not going to do a recall. There's no reason for them to do that. They'll just bulk RMA to their business customers, which is what they're already doing, but I don't think that the ones that they're sending them even are guaranteed to work long term without this problem happening again. So I think they're going to have to fix it via stepping change. That's the only way this is going to be fixed permanently.